Court-martial begins after all the excitement is already over, cutting past the thrilling events of the Enterprise weathering through a dangerous ion storm. So rough, somebody was actually killed. Yet the episode contents itself with the action-packed thrill of Kirk filing a report about what happened. If we're lucky, perhaps we'll get to watch him fill out a form. So the Enterprise is now at Starbase 11 for repairs, and Commodore Stone is good enough to put the repair crews on the Enterprise instead of the Intrepid, either recognizing the importance of his 5-year mission or else get Kirk off his starbase as quickly as possible. Man's a trouble magnet. If he stays too long, a giant space mushroom will probably show up and try to eat the place. Now, there's a reason we didn't see the ion storm. Court-martial was something of a bottle episode. Minimal new sets and such in order to save some money. So the real drama begins when Spock arrives with the computer record of the events, and they contradict Kirk's account. Kirk said that Lieutenant Commander Finney was in the pod during the storm. Things got bad, they went to red alert, and waiting as long as possible for Finney to get clear, and then jettisoned the pod when there was no time left, leaving the poor dope to die. Now to break the news to his daughter.
Jamie.
Wow, this is a challenge. Trying not to smirk while saying her father's dead, even though she's dressed like Jesus. I think Colin Baker just had his first serious competition for ugliest clothes in sci-fi. She rants at Kirk, saying that he hated her father and that this was murder, and that shockingly seems to be backed up by the records that Spock brought. Kirk jettisoned the pod before the red alert was declared. This news gets around fast, because when Kirk arrives in the local watering hole and sees a bunch of his old classmates, they're already discussing how Kirk killed a man, and seem to believe that he's guilty. There's likely a bit of jealousy at work here, given Kirk's meteoric rise and all that. Otherwise, you'd expect his old classmates to be at least willing to hear his side of it first. So Kirk storms out, bumping into someone on the way.
If you have any doubt, that was indeed Captain James Kirk of the Enterprise.
I'm telling you, people underestimate how much mojo Bones has, although James Bond would probably be overshadowed if he stood next to Kirk. Lieutenant Shaw here actually knew Kirk, but McCoy doesn't let that get in the way of getting his game on. Going to be another house call for Dr. Love. Kirk's busy giving a formal explanation of what happened, and also their history. He and Finney used to be good friends. In fact, the girl dressed like a fusion between Happy Days and the Jetsons is named Jamie. But not James, because giving a woman a masculine name is never going to happen in Star Trek. They had a falling out because when Kirk relieved Finney on duty once, Finney had cocked up and left a panel open, nearly destroying the ship. Naturally, Finney's career was tanked, nearly blowing up the ship due to Butterfingers, which compounded the problem of him having had his career on hold while instructing at the academy. I'm not sure what the subject was. Be kind of ironic if it was door closing 201. All this explains why there might be resentment, but if anything, this backs up the idea that Kirk would want to finally rid himself of someone who grew to despise him. So the Commodore puts the record on hold for a moment to hash this out with Kirk. The strain of being a captain can wear on even the strongest. Maybe Kirk made a mistake because of stress. Maybe it's time to leave the captain's chair for a cushy desk job. Kirk is incensed at the idea, both that he could break under pressure or that someone could die because of his sloppiness. And what's worse is that not only is this excuse being dragged out, but as far as Commodore Stone is concerned, it's a cover-up to protect the service from Kirk's disgusting and unconscionable behavior. Well, this specifically. The rumors about the ambassador's wife and 2 daughters is stuff that he does not want to touch. So Kirk is going to be court-martialed, but that doesn't mean he can't check in on his old friend Shaw, who's happy to see him but worried about his bravado. He may believe he's innocent. He may even be innocent. But the evidence makes him look as guilty as a guy discovered naked hiding under a bed.
You're not an ordinary human. You're a starship captain.
Why do you think superhero names always use captain, huh? She recommends a good lawyer for him to use to defend himself, because the prosecution is going to base their case on Kirk versus the computer.
You still haven't told me how you know so much about what the prosecution's going to do.
Because, Jim Kirk, my dear old love, I am the prosecution.
I'm not a lawyer, but don't you think it's a conflict of interest to be prosecuting someone you dated? I mean, considering the officers judging the case haven't even arrived and you're already filling Kirk in on your strategy, this seems like a big no-no. Then again, the lawyer Kirk is stuck with is a bit of an eccentric. Of course, he would have to be. He's defending this guy, What lawyer in the world can stand side by side with Kirk and find a way to overshadow him? I mean, there's only one.
What's my name?
Denny Crane?
Like you mean it.
Denny Crane.
What's my name?
Denny Crane!
No further questions.
But since he's not an option, we have Samuel T. Cogley, who has shown up with an entire law library that he has piled all over the place. It's much better, he says, to rummage through this crazy-ass pile than do anything so practical as use a computer. Still, Cogley, despite his Luddite tendencies, is immediately engaging and demonstrates one of the great things about TOS. Think about the mercenaries covered recently in Gambit. What were their personalities? There was Baran, who was a generic smarmy guy in charge, and his underlings, who just sheepishly did their jobs, maybe raised a voice to gripe, and they wanted money. And that was in a two-parter with plenty of room to flesh them out. Yet people like Cogley and Harry Mudd were on hand in TOS, adding real charm to their stories. Not because of their eccentricities so much as the fact that they were characters with real personality. So the court-martial is called and Kirk offers his plea.
Not guilty.
What are you writing, Cogley? All that's happened is he said he's not guilty. Did you really need to note that? Because I thought that would be central to your case. Anyway, Spock is called to the stand first, and Shaw has him address the obvious sole objection to the case, that the computer is wrong. He admits the computer shows no signs of malfunction, having examined it thoroughly, and admits that he did not personally witness Kirk push the button that shot Finney into space like James Bond's ejector seat. Yet he also contends the computer is wrong nevertheless, and while that seems a completely emotional response, that his knowledge of Kirk's personality trumps a recording of the event as it happened, he insists that it is nothing but logic, comparing it to gravity. You don't need to watch a hammer fall to know that it will. It shows the depths of his belief in his friend. If the choice is between Kirk panicking or malevolent, and a perfectly functioning computer being inaccurate, he believes the latter with total certainty. Shaw calls the personnel officer next, the one in charge of the service records of everyone on the ship, and so ironically is not even given a name. She confirms that Finney has it on his record that he screwed up, and that Kirk was the one who fixed it and reported it, damaging Finney's career. Shaw also calls McCoy to address the psychological response to that. Finney likely resented Kirk, and thus Kirk would reciprocate in time. McCoy says that in theory, yes, but that wouldn't apply to Kirk either, although he's not willing to say it's a falling hammer kind of solid fact, and that's a concern because McCoy knows a thing or two about getting hammered. The Commodore finally asks if Cogley plans to actually do anything besides collect a large bill, considering he said a grand total of 6 words since this court-martial started. Cogley says he's just getting all the bullshit out of the way so he can get down to what actually matters, and puts Kirk on the stand. The record of his awards is so long the prosecution asks to concede that Kirk is awesome so they're not stuck here all day. I particularly like that Kirk was awarded with Conspicuous Gallantry, which is based on a real military decoration, but it gives me the image of Kirk drawing enemy fire by hopping through the battlefield in a clown suit. Kirk repeats what happened.
We were in an ion storm. Everyone here in this court knows the dangers involved.
This makes me laugh every time, because I always think of that stupid "I learned this from my dad" thing that Archer said back in Broken Bow to justify not avoiding an ion storm when they could have easily done so. Archer cluelessly speeds ahead into something that a man who got into a fistfight with a dinosaur says is really dangerous. But almost as damning is the evidence against Kirk, showing him clearly pushing the jettison button while it was still only yellow alert. And even his attorney is wondering if Kirk did it, if only by mistake. Kirk considers it, but finally comes back to the same point. He didn't do that. He wouldn't do that. And if Cogley doesn't believe him, then he can leave. Cogley's problem, though, is that he has nothing else to do. All these frickin' books everywhere, but when the only counter to an infallible piece of evidence is, well then even Johnny Cochran isn't going to save your butt. Jamie comes by, thankfully no longer bitter, but trying to persuade Cogley to accept the offer of the Commodore and have Kirk captain a desk. It's too late for that, though, even if Kirk was inclined to take such a post, which short answer is no, and long answer is fuck no. Well, aside of Jamie believing he's innocent, Kirk's got a whole lot of nothing. So when the court reconvenes, all Cogley can do is shrug his shoulders and rest his case. But that's when Spock and McCoy burst in with new evidence, and Cogley gives a speech about rights, pointing out that Kirk has never had a chance to confront his accuser, the computer itself. The only fair way to do so, he insists, is to reconvene this case on the Enterprise itself, where Spock explains the experiment that he did after talking with Kirk earlier. He played three-dimensional chess against the computer. Because he had programmed it based upon his knowledge of the game, the best he should have been able to do was a draw, and yet he won 5 out of 5. Such a thing could only happen if the computer was somehow tampered with. And yet everything looks fine, so it's more than just damaging it by throwing a rock in there or opening an email telling you won the Andorian lottery. It requires a great deal of technical knowledge. Only Kirk, Spock, and Finney had the knowledge to do something like this. Scotty is not mentioned. Apparently he doesn't understand computers well.
Hello, computer.
Cogley then points out that the search Kirk ordered is a standard one by Starfleet, one that's designed around searching high and low for a man who might be injured or unconscious, but not one intended to find a man who's deliberately avoiding rescue. Thus, Cogley offers his own theory to the court. Kirk is not guilty of murder because Finney is still alive. They have a plan to find him, too, using the very computer that he'd manipulated.
Gentlemen, this computer has an auditory sensor. It can, in effect, hear sounds. By installing a booster, we can increase that capability on the order of 1 to the 4th power.
Wow, 1 to the 4th power. So that's, 1. I think maybe the computer is still not giving you the right answer, Kirk. To track him down, they evacuate the ship, turn off the engines, and turn up the volume so loud that they can hear the heartbeats of everyone on the ship. Bones then goes around and samples each person's heart so it can be removed from the playback.
That's all of us, except for the crewman in the transporter room. Mr. Spock, eliminate his heartbeat.
Done. He's now dead. Good. As you can see, Court, Finney is alive, so I'm not a murderer. What about the guy you just killed? Oh, well, that's easy. Double jeopardy says I can't be tried for the same crime twice, ergo, I can never be charged with murder again. So watch yourself. Kirk heads down alone, and we see that Finney has lost his mind, babbling about conspiracies against him. He's in some ways a cautionary tale about Kirk himself. Finney is clearly so close, if not outright as capable, as Kirk himself is. He can tamper with the ship precisely because he's just that good. He was so capable he taught at the academy, and like Kirk, he cannot abide disgrace or not having his own ship. Finney plots revenge because at this point, it's all he has open to him. The idea that the thing he lives for is being unfairly kept from him has left him a man with nothing else to live for. It reflects the point the Commodore brought up at the beginning, that only a fraction of the population can ever captain a ship. Finney is qualified for it in every way except for one. He has the same lack of nerve that Kirk himself was accused of. Kirk eventually defeats him, which is good because Finney has rigged up the ship to crash. So Kirk saves it, thanks to some linking narration because the fight scene ran too long. Then he makes out with Shaw on the bridge in spite of mentioning the protocols, if only to prove what a bad idea it would be to put him behind a desk. Stick him in an office, he'll be chasing the female staffers around within a week. Starfleet's going to go broke with all the lawsuits. Post-episode follow-up. Annoying character goes to Jamie's dress. That is bad even by TOS standards. That's a dress your parents put you in to ensure that you keep your virginity. Final score for Court Martial is 6 out of 10. It's an above-average outing, giving us the template for the memorable TNG episode The Measure of a Man. An ironic reversal given Cogley's declaration that a machine has no rights. The investigation is interesting and engaging, and the character work well done. But what hampers it is some of the silliness, like Shaw prosecuting the case, or the court refusing to leave when the Enterprise is in imminent danger, and a predictable action scene to speed through the ending. Court Martial is a thinking episode that is let down by the predictable and the questionable. Still, you can't help but feel sorry for Finney despite what he's done. Who of us hasn't had a mistake in the past that they regret? A lot of us might want to just turn back the clock and do everything all over again, but right this time. Hail the Overlord!
Mr. Spock, you're the most cold-blooded man I've ever known.
Why, thank you, Doctor.